I always had a feeling something was off. My wife, Sarah, had been acting strangely for months. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just little changes. She started going out more often, spending more time on her phone, and getting defensive over the smallest things. First, I chalked it up to stress. But then, I started noticing patterns. She became overly nice to me, almost unnaturally so. She'd go out of her way to compliment me, cook my favorite meals, and even suggest vacations. Things she never did before. It felt forced, like she was trying too hard. Then, just as quickly, she'd switch and pick fights over meaningless things. It was as if she was testing how easily she could get me to argue back. I didn't want to believe my marriage was falling apart, but something deep down told me to prepare. I started doing small things, checking our financial statements, making copies of important documents, and keeping track of any unusual expenses. What really set off alarms was when I found out she had visited a divorce lawyer. I only discovered this because she left her email open on our shared computer. She had an appointment scheduled, and the subject line made it clear: divorce consultation, financial planning. That was the moment I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't about to let myself be blindsided. Over the next few weeks, I slowly moved my assets around. I transferred money to a separate account, made sure my name was the only one on certain investments, and even put some of my most valuable possessions in a storage unit under my brother's name. I wasn't hiding money, I was protecting what I had worked for. Sarah remained oblivious, still playing her strange game of fake affection mixed with random hostility. But I kept my cool. I watched as she made her plans, fully expecting to strike when she thought I'd be at my weakest. Then, 2 weeks later, it happened. She filed for divorce. But what she didn't know was that I had already seen it coming. The moment I got served with divorce papers, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had been expecting it, but seeing the official documents in my hands made everything real. Sarah had played her cards, and now it was my turn. She acted like she was in control. That night, she came home acting as if nothing had happened. She didn't bring up the papers or acknowledge what she had done. Instead, she was smiling, humming a song in the kitchen while making herself a drink. She was waiting for me to explode, to demand answers, to beg or panic. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I sat down on the couch, turned on the TV, and ignored her completely. By the next morning, I could tell she was getting impatient. She started throwing little hints into our conversations. "I think we should keep things civil," she said while sipping her coffee. "It'll be easier that way." I nodded. Of course. She was expecting me to ask about money, the house, or the assets. But I stayed calm. Meanwhile, I already had my own lawyer lined up. I sent everything over that same morning. The papers, the financial records, even the evidence I had of her strange behavior leading up to this. My lawyer confirmed what I had suspected. Sarah was banking on getting a huge payout. But there was one problem for her. She had assumed all of our shared assets were still there, ready to be split. She had no idea I had already moved things around legally. When she found out, it hit her hard. 3 days later, she tried to act like nothing had happened. She made dinner, asked about my day, and even suggested we go for a walk. But I could see the cracks forming. She was stalling. That night, she sat next to me on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I could see the stress in her eyes. She was checking her accounts, realizing that what she had expected to take wasn't there. The next morning, she snapped. I woke up to the sound of Sarah angrily pacing around the bedroom. She was on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "What do you mean it's not there?" she hissed. "That doesn't make sense. He hasn't touched that account in years." She didn't realize I was awake, and I listened as she grilled whoever was on the other end. Probably a lawyer or financial advisor. She was starting to put the pieces together. After she hung up, she stormed out of the room without saying a word to me. I took my time getting up, making breakfast, and acting like it was just another day. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to break character. But I wasn't playing her game. By noon, she finally snapped. "What did you do?" she demanded. I looked up from my coffee. "About what?" "You know what I'm talking about. The accounts. The money. Where is it?" I shrugged. "Everything's where it's supposed to be." Her face twisted with frustration. She wasn't used to this. She had always been the one in control, always confident she could manipulate any situation to her advantage. But this time she had underestimated me. She tried a new tactic. Instead of anger, she softened her voice. "We don't have to do this," she said, sitting down across from me. "I just want what's fair. We built this life together." That made me laugh. "You mean I built this life, and you planned on taking half of it?" Her mask slipped, just for a second, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. That afternoon, she met with her lawyer again. I could tell because she left the house dressed in her business outfit, the one she always wore when she wanted to look serious and intimidating. I stayed home, waiting. I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, my lawyer called me later. "She's trying to push for an emergency financial disclosure," he said. "She wants to freeze assets and claim financial misconduct." I wasn't surprised. Sarah thought she could strong-arm the situation by making it look like I was hiding money illegally. What she didn't realize was that I had done everything by the book. My lawyer had made sure of it. There was no fraud, no hidden funds, just smart, preemptive planning. That night, Sarah was eerily quiet. No fake affection, no passive-aggressive remarks, just silence. She barely touched her dinner and kept checking her phone. I could feel the tension in the air. She thought she had me trapped, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, Sarah was already up before me. She had her laptop open at the kitchen table, scrolling furiously through documents. Her coffee sat untouched, and I could tell she hadn't slept well. I took my time getting ready, pretending not to notice. I knew she was spiraling, trying to figure out where she went wrong. Then she finally spoke. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I sat down across from her. "All right." She folded her hands together, trying to regain control. "Look, I think we should settle this fairly. Dragging this out won't help either of us." I almost laughed. Just yesterday, she was trying to pull legal moves on me, and now she was playing the reasonable one. I didn't bother responding. I just sipped my coffee and waited. She took a deep breath. "I spoke with my lawyer. If you just agree to an even split, we won't have to go through court." That confirmed what I suspected. She had hit a wall. The financial disclosure request hadn't gone in her favor, and she was trying to salvage what she could. I set my mug down. "I think I'll let my lawyer handle things." Her jaw tightened. "You're being difficult." I didn't respond. Just like before, I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. Later that afternoon, I got another call from my lawyer. "She's trying another angle," he said, "claiming she contributed to your success and deserves a bigger share." I shook my head. Sarah had never worked a day in her life since we got married. She had always lived off my earnings, spending money freely while I handled the real responsibilities. If anything, I had been the one carrying her all these years. That night, she made another move. Instead of picking a fight, she tried playing the emotional card. "I never wanted it to be like this," she said quietly as she sat on the couch beside me. "I just thought we were in this together." I glanced at her. "Were we?" She hesitated. She knew I saw through her. The next day, she made a drastic mistake. She tried to go after the house. I came home from work to find Sarah sitting in the living room with a smug look on her face. Something was off. She wasn't tense or frustrated like before. She looked almost satisfied, as if she had pulled off something big. "Got some mail for you," she said, sliding an envelope across the table. I already knew what it was before I even opened it. A legal notice. She was trying to claim exclusive occupancy of the house. In simple terms, she wanted me out. I looked at her, but she was already pretending to scroll through her phone, acting casual. I sighed. "So that's your next move?" She smirked. Well, I need stability during the divorce. My lawyer says it makes sense for me to stay here while we figure things out. You can always find another place for now. I almost laughed at the audacity. Sarah had never paid a single mortgage payment, never handled the bills, never lifted a finger to maintain the house. Yet here she was, trying to take it from me. What she didn't realize was that I had already prepared for this. My name was the only one on the mortgage and deed. She had never been added because she never contributed financially. Instead of arguing, I just nodded. All right. Her face twitched slightly. She expected me to explode, to demand answers, to panic. But I wasn't giving her that. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. He assured me that Sarah had no legal standing to kick me out. He also advised me to stay calm and not let her provoke me. If she could claim I was being aggressive or making her feel unsafe, she might be able to push for an emergency order. So I did exactly what I needed to do, nothing. I continued living my life as if nothing had changed. I came home at my usual time, made dinner, watched TV, and went to bed like always. Meanwhile, Sarah was getting restless. Her plan wasn't working. Then she made her next mistake. She started moving things. One night, I noticed some of my personal belongings missing. Important papers, sentimental items, even a few expensive watches I had collected over the years. When I asked her about it, she played dumb. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't argue. Instead, I installed hidden cameras inside the house, nothing illegal, just basic security cameras in shared spaces. Within a few days, I had exactly what I needed. The footage showed Sarah sneaking into my office and taking documents. Another clip showed her packing up some of my belongings into a suitcase. She was clearly trying to make it look like I was slowly moving out on my own. I sent everything to my lawyer. She's trying to create a paper trail, he said. She wants to show the court that you voluntarily left so she can claim the house. But what she didn't know was that she had just built a case against herself. A week later, she came home to find a different kind of letter waiting for her. A legal notice from my lawyer. She was being formally warned for tampering with my personal property. If she kept it up, she'd be facing serious legal trouble. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely nervous. She wasn't winning this game, and she knew it. After receiving the legal notice, Sarah's confidence cracked. She didn't say anything that night, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She had been playing offense the entire time, but now she was on the defensive. She wasn't used to that. For the next few days, she kept her distance. No more smug comments, no more games. She was clearly trying to figure out her next move. I didn't let my guard down, though. I knew she wasn't giving up. She was just biding her time. Then, like clockwork, she struck again. One evening, I came home to find her crying on the phone with someone. Her voice was loud enough that I couldn't ignore it. "He's been so cold to me," she sobbed. "I feel unsafe in my own home." I froze. This was a dangerous move. She was trying to build a case that I was emotionally abusive or even threatening. If she played it right, she could file for a restraining order which would force me out of the house. I knew better than to engage. I walked past her, grabbed a drink from the fridge, and went straight to my room. No reaction. No response. Nothing she could use against me. Later that night, I called my lawyer. "She's trying to set the stage for an abuse claim," I told him. "Then you need to be extra careful," he warned. "No arguments, no confrontations, and document everything." I followed his advice. I started keeping a journal, logging every interaction with her. I made sure to have an alibi for my whereabouts whenever I wasn't home. I even told a few close friends what was going on, just in case I needed witnesses later. Then, just as I feared, she took the next step. A few days later, 2 police officers showed up at the house. "We received a report of a domestic disturbance," one of them said. I remained calm. "I haven't done anything." They asked to speak to Sarah, and she came out of the bedroom looking shaken. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying. "He's been acting so aggressive," she said softly. I just don't feel safe. The officers looked at me, waiting for a response. I took a deep breath. Check the cameras. Sarah stiffened. I pulled up the footage from the last few days. Every interaction, every time she tried to bait me, and every time I ignored her. I showed them proof that I had been avoiding conflict completely. The officers exchanged glances. They knew exactly what was going on. A few minutes later, they left without taking any action. Sarah had failed. She didn't say a word for the rest of the night. But I knew one thing. She was running out of options. And she was getting desperate. After the police left, Sarah locked herself in the bedroom for the rest of the night. She didn't try to talk to me, didn't make any fake attempts to smooth things over. She knew her plan had failed, and for the first time, she had no idea what to do next. The next morning, she was gone before I even woke up. I didn't know where she went, but I had a feeling she was scrambling for another move. She had already tried to take the house, paint me as the villain, and even involve the police. None of it worked. I spent the next few days keeping my routine normal, but I knew something was coming. Sure enough, my lawyer called me with an update. She's filed an emergency request for spousal support, he said. She's claiming she has no financial stability and that you've been withholding money from her. I almost laughed. Sarah had spent the last several years living off my income while doing nothing to contribute. And now she wanted to play the victim. What are the chances of her getting it? I asked. Not great, he admitted. Since she's not on any of your main assets, she has no real financial claim yet. But she's trying to force your hand, hoping you'll settle. I shook my head. Not happening. Later that night, Sarah came home acting as if nothing had happened. She even greeted me casually, like we weren't in the middle of a legal battle. But I wasn't fooled. She started cooking dinner, humming to herself. Then, as if it were just another conversation, she said, I think we should try to talk this out. Maybe come to an agreement before the lawyers make things worse. I didn't answer. She set down a plate in front of me. I don't want to fight anymore. We were happy once, weren't we? I looked at her. Is that before or after you tried to get me arrested? Her smile faltered. That was just a misunderstanding. I pushed my plate away. I'm done playing this game, Sarah. She sat back, crossing her arms. So what, you're just going to drag this out? Make things harder for both of us? I shook my head. No, I'm going to let the lawyers handle it. And you're going to have to deal with the fact that you're not getting what you expected. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger, not manipulation. Fear. She was realizing that every plan she had made had crumbled. She stayed quiet for the rest of the night. But I could tell she was thinking. And I had a feeling her final move was coming soon. The tension in the house was unbearable. Sarah barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was short and clipped. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to find one last way to come out on top. She had tried everything: manipulation, false accusations, legal loopholes, but nothing had worked. Then, a few days later, she made her final move. I came home to find the house eerily quiet. At first, I thought she wasn't there, but then I noticed the open suitcase in the hallway. Clothes were missing from the closet. Drawers were half empty. Sarah was leaving. For a second, I almost felt relief. But then I spotted the envelope on the kitchen counter. I opened it, expecting some final legal threat. Instead, it was a letter. She wrote about how she never expected things to turn out like this, how she thought we were going to grow old together. She didn't apologize. Sarah never apologized. But she did admit that she had been desperate. The last line stood out to me the most. I thought I could beat you at this game, but I never realized you weren't playing. I set the letter down and took a deep breath. She had finally realized that I was never reacting, never engaging, because I had already won before she even made her first move. A few hours later, I got the confirmation from my lawyer. Sarah had withdrawn her spousal support request and had agreed to settle the divorce without a fight. She had lost. I never saw her again after that. From what I heard, she moved in with a friend and tried to rebuild her life. But she was no longer my problem. The house was mine. My assets were protected. And for the first time in